1926.1437. Floating cranes/derricks and land cranes/derricks on barges. Subpart C. Cranes and derricks in construction. 1926.1437a. This section contains supplemental requirements for floating cranes/derricks and land cranes/derricks on barges, pontoons, vessels or other means of flotation, i.e., vessel/flotation device. The sections of this subpart apply to floating cranes/derricks and land cranes/derricks on barges, pontoons, vessels or other means of flotation, unless specified otherwise. The requirements of this section do not apply when using jacked barges when the jacks are deployed to the river, lake, or seabed and the barge is fully supported by the jacks. 1926.1437b. General requirements. The requirements in paragraphs C through K of this section apply to both floating cranes/derricks and land cranes/derricks on barges, pontoons, vessels or other means of flotation. 1926.1437c. Work area control. 1926.1437c. 1. The requirements of section 1926.1424, work area control, apply, except for section 1926.1424, A.2.2. 1926.1437c. 2. The employer must either 1926.1437c. 2, I, through c. 2, erect and maintain control lines, warning lines, railings or similar barriers to mark the boundaries of the hazard areas, or clearly mark the hazard areas by a combination of warning signs, such as danger, swing/crush zone, and high visibility markings on the equipment that identify the hazard areas. In addition, the employer must train each employee to understand what these markings signify. 1926.1437d. Keeping clear of the load. Section 1926.1425 does not apply. 1926.1437e. Additional safety devices. In addition to the safety devices listed in section 1926.1415, the following safety devices are required. 1926.1437e1 through e3, barge, pontoon, vessel or other means of flotation list and trim device. The safety device must be located in the cab or, when there is no cab, at the operator's station. Positive equipment house lock. Wind speed and direction indicator. A competent person must determine if wind is a factor that needs to be considered. If wind needs to be considered, a wind speed and direction indicator must be used. 1926.1437f. Operational aids. 1926.1437 F1 and F2. An anti-two-block device is required only when hoisting personnel or hoisting over an occupied cofferdam or shaft. Section 1926.1416 E4, load weighing and similar devices, does not apply to dragline, clamshell, grapple, magnet, drop ball, container handling, concrete bucket, and pile driving work performed under this section. 1926.1437 G. Accessibility of procedures applicable to equipment operation. If the crane/derrick has a cab, the requirements of section 1926.1417 C apply. If the crane/derrick does not have a cab, the employer must ensure that 1926.1437 G1 and G2 rated capacities, load charts, are posted at the operator's station. If the operator's station is movable, such as with pendant-controlled equipment, the load charts are posted on the equipment. Procedures applicable to the operation of the equipment, other than load charts, recommended operating speeds, special hazard warnings, instructions and operator's manual, must be readily available on board the vessel/flotation device. 1926.1437 H. Inspections. In addition to meeting the requirements of section 1926.1412 for inspecting the crane/derrick, the employer must inspect the barge, pontoons, vessel or other means of flotation used to support a floating crane/derrick or land crane/derrick, and ensure that 1926.1437 H1 shift. For each shift inspection, the means used to secure/attach the equipment to the vessel/flotation device is in proper condition, including wear, corrosion, loose or missing fasteners, defective welds, and, when applicable, insufficient tension. 1926.1437 H2 monthly. For each monthly inspection. 1926.1437 H2I through H2V, the means used to secure/attach the equipment to the vessel/flotation devices in proper condition, including inspection for wear, corrosion, and, when applicable, insufficient tension. The vessel/flotation device is not taking on water. The deck load is properly secured. The vessel/flotation device is watertight based on the condition of the chain lockers, storage, fuel compartments, and hatches. The firefighting and life-saving equipment is in place and functional. 1926.1437 H3, the shift in monthly inspections are conducted by a competent person, and 1926.1437 H3I and H3-2, if any deficiency is identified, an immediate determination is made by a qualified person whether the deficiency constitutes a hazard. If the deficiency is determined to constitute a hazard, the vessel/flotation device is removed from service until the deficiency has been corrected. 1926.1437 H4, Annual External Vessel/Flotation Device Inspection. For each annual inspection, 1926.1437 H4I, the external portion of the barge, pontoons, vessel, or other means of flotation used is inspected annually by a qualified person who has expertise with respect to vessels/flotation devices, and that the inspection includes the following items: 1926.1437 H4I A through E, the items identified in paragraphs H1 shift and H2 monthly of this section. Cleats, bits, chocks, fenders, capstans, ladders, and stanchions, for significant corrosion, wear, deterioration, or deformation that could impair the function of these items. External evidence of leaks and structural damage. Evidence of leaks and damage below the waterline may be determined through internal inspection of the vessel/flotation device. Four-corner draft readings. Firefighting equipment for serviceability. 1926.1437 H4-2, rescue skiffs, lifelines, work vests, life preservers, and ring buoys are inspected for proper condition. 1926.1437 H4-3, if any deficiency is identified, an immediate determination is made by the qualified person whether the deficiency constitutes a hazard or, though not yet a hazard, needs to be monitored in the monthly inspections. 1926.1437 H4-3 A and B. If the qualified person determines that the deficiency constitutes a hazard, the vessel/flotation device is removed from service until it has been corrected. See requirements in section 1926.1417 F. If the qualified person determines that, though not presently a hazard, the deficiency needs to be monitored, the deficiency is checked in the monthly inspections. 1926.1437 H5, 4-year, internal vessel/flotation device inspection. For each 4-year inspection, 1926.1437 H5I, a marine engineer, marine architect, licensed surveyor, or other qualified person who has expertise with respect to vessels/flotation devices surveys the internal portion of the barge, pontoons, vessel, or other means of flotation. 1926.1437 H5-2, if the surveyor identifies a deficiency, an immediate determination is made by the surveyor as to whether the deficiency constitutes a hazard or, though not yet a hazard, needs to be monitored in the monthly or annual inspections, as appropriate. 1926.1437 H5-2 A and B, if the surveyor determines that the deficiency constitutes a hazard, the vessel/flotation device is removed from service until it has been corrected. If the surveyor determines that, though not presently a hazard, the deficiency needs to be monitored, the deficiency is checked in the monthly or annual inspections, as appropriate. 1926.1437 H6, Documentation. The monthly and annual inspections required in paragraphs H2 and H4 of this section are documented in accordance with sections 1926.1412 E3 and 1926.1412 F7, respectively, and that the 4-year inspection required in paragraph H5 of this section is documented in accordance with section 1926.1412 F7, except that the documentation for that inspection must be retained for a minimum of 4 years. All such documents must be made available, during the applicable document retention period, to all persons who conduct inspections in accordance with Section 1926.1412. 1926.1437(I), reserved. 1926.1437(J), working with a diver. The employer must meet the following additional requirements when working with a diver in the water. 1926.1437(J), 1. If a crane/derrick is used to get a diver into and out of the water, it must not be used for any other purpose until the diver is back on board. When used for more than one diver, it must not be used for any other purpose until all divers are back on board. 1926.1437(J), 2. The operator must remain at the controls of the crane/derrick at all times. 1926.1437(J), 3. In addition to the requirements in sections 1926.1419 through 1926.1422, signals, either 1926.1437(J), 3(I), and J, 3, 2, a clear line of sight must be maintained between the operator and tender, or the signals between the operator and tender must be transmitted electronically. 1926.1437(J), 4. The means used to secure the crane/derrick to the vessel/flotation device, see paragraph N, 5, of this section, must not allow any amount of shifting in any direction. 1926.1437(K), Manufacturer's Specifications and Limitations. 1926.1437(K), 1. The employer must ensure that the barge, pontoons, vessel, or other means of flotation must be capable of withstanding imposed environmental, operational and in-transit loads when used in accordance with the manufacturer's specifications and limitations. 1926.1437(K), 2. The employer must ensure that the manufacturer's specifications and limitations with respect to environmental, operational, and in-transit loads for a barge, pontoon, vessel, or other means of flotation are not exceeded or violated. 1926.1437(K), 3. When the manufacturer's specifications and limitations are unavailable, the employer must ensure that the specifications and limitations established by a qualified person with respect to environmental, operational and in-transit loads for the barge, pontoons, vessel, or other means of flotation are not exceeded or violated. 1926.1437(L), reserved. 1926.1437(M), floating cranes/derricks. For equipment designed by the manufacturer, or employer, for marine use by permanent attachment to barges, pontoons, vessels or other means of flotation. 1926.1437(M), 1. Load charts. 1926.1437(M), 1(I), and M, 1, 2. The employer must not exceed the manufacturer load charts applicable to operations on water. When using these charts, the employer must comply with all parameters and limitations, such as dynamic and environmental parameters, applicable to the use of the charts. The employer must ensure that load charts take into consideration a minimum wind speed of 40 miles per hour. 1926.1437(M), 2. The employer must ensure that the requirements for maximum allowable list and maximum allowable trim as specified in Table M1 of this section are met. Table M1. Equipment designed for marine use by permanent attachment, other than derricks. If the rated capacity is 25 tons or less, the maximum allowable list is 5 degree. The maximum allowable trim is 5 degrees. If the rated capacity is over 25 tons, the maximum allowable list is 7 degree. The maximum allowable trim is 7 degrees. For derricks designed for marine use by permanent attachment, if any rated capacity, the maximum allowable list is 10 degree. The maximum allowable trim is 10 degrees. Table M2. Operated at rated capacity, 60 mile per hour wind speed, 2 feet minimum freeboard. Operated at rated capacity plus 25%, 60 mile per hour wind speed, 1 feet minimum freeboard. Operated at high boom, no load, 60 mile per hour wind speed, 2 feet minimum freeboard. Table M3. For backward stability of the boom. Operated at high boom, no load, full back list, least stable condition, 90 mile per hour wind speed. 1926.1437(M), 4. If the equipment is employer-made, it must not be used unless the employer has documents demonstrating that the load charts and applicable parameters for use meet the requirements of paragraphs M1 through 3 of this section. Such documents must be signed by a registered professional engineer who is a qualified person with respect to the design of this type of equipment, including the means of flotation. 1926.1437 M5. The employer must ensure that the barge, pontoons, vessel, or other means of flotation used. 1926.1437 M5 I through M5 3 are structurally sufficient to withstand the static and dynamic loads of the crane/derrick when operating at the crane/derrick's maximum rated capacity with all planned and actual deck loads in ballasted compartments. Have a subdivided hull with one or more longitudinal watertight bulkheads for reducing the free surface effect. Have access to void compartments to allow for inspection and pumping. 1926.1437 N. Land cranes/derricks. For land cranes/derricks used on barges, pontoons, vessels, or other means of flotation, the employer must ensure that 1926.1437 N1. The rated capacity of the equipment, including but not limited to modification of load charts, applicable for use on land is reduced to 1926.1437 N1 I through N1 3, account for increased loading from list, trim, wave action, and wind. Be applicable to a specified locations on the specific barge, pontoons, vessel, or other means of flotation that will be used, under the environmental conditions expected and encountered. The conditions required in paragraphs N3 and N4 of this section are met. 1926.1437 N2. The rated capacity modification required in paragraph N1 of this section is performed by the equipment manufacturer, or a qualified person who has expertise with respect to both land crane/derrick capacity and the stability of vessels/flotation devices. 1926.1437 N3. For list and trim. 1926.1437 N3 I and N3 2. The maximum allowable list and the maximum allowable trim for the barge, pontoon, vessel, or other means of flotation must not exceed the amount necessary to ensure that the conditions in paragraph N4 of this section are met. In addition, the maximum allowable list and the maximum allowable trim does not exceed the least of the following: 5 degrees, the amount specified by the crane/derrick manufacturer, or, when an amount is not so specified, the amount specified by the qualified person. The maximum allowable list and the maximum allowable trim for the land crane/derrick does not exceed the amount specified by the crane/derrick manufacturer, or, when an amount is not so specified, the amount specified by the qualified person. 1926.1437 N4. For the following conditions: 1926.1437 N4 I and N4 2. All deck surfaces of the barge, pontoons, vessel, or other means of flotation used are above water. The entire bottom area of the barge, pontoons, vessel, or other means of flotation used is submerged. 1926.1437 N5. Physical attachment, corralling, rail system, and centerline cable system meet the requirements in Option 1, Option 2, Option 3, or Option 4 of this section, and that whichever option is used also meets the requirements of paragraph N5V of this section. 1926.1437 N5 I through N5 4. Option 1. Physical attachment. The crane/derrick is physically attached to the barge, pontoons, vessel, or other means of flotation. Methods of physical attachment include crossed cable systems attached to the crane/derrick and vessel/flotation device, bolting or welding the crane/derrick to the vessel/flotation device, strapping the crane/derrick to the vessel/flotation device with chains, or other methods of physical attachment. Option 2. Corralling. The crane/derrick is prevented from shifting by installing barricade restraints, i.e., a corralling system. Employers must ensure that corralling systems do not allow the equipment to shift by any amount of shifting in any direction. Option 3. Rails. The crane/derrick must be prevented from shifting by being mounted on a rail system. Employers must ensure that rail clamps and rail stops are used unless the system is designed to prevent movement during operation by other means. 1926.1437 N5 4. Option 4. Centerline cable system. The crane/derrick is prevented from shifting by being mounted to a wire rope system. The employer must ensure that the wire rope system meets the following requirements. 1926.1437 N 5, 4, A through E. The wire rope and attachments are of sufficient size and strength to support the side load of crane/derrick. The wire rope is attached physically to the vessel/flotation device. The wire rope is attached to the crane/derrick by appropriate attachment methods, such as shackles or sheaves, on the undercarriage, and that the method used will allow the crew to secure the crane/derrick from movement during operation and to move the crane/derrick longitudinally along the vessel/flotation device for repositioning. Means are installed to prevent the crane/derrick from passing the forward or aft end of the wire rope attachments. The crane/derrick is secured from movement during operation. 1926.1437 N 5 V. The system/means used to comply with Option 1, Option 2, Option 3, or Option 4 of this section are designed by a marine engineer, registered professional engineer familiar with floating crane/derrick design, or qualified person familiar with floating crane/derrick design. 1926.1437 N 6 Exception. For mobile auxiliary cranes used on the deck of a floating crane/derrick, the requirement specified by paragraph N 5 of this section to use Option 1, Option 2, Option 3, or Option 4 does not apply when the employer demonstrates implementation of a plan and procedures that meet the following requirements. 1926.1437 N 6 I through N 6 6. A marine engineer or registered professional engineer familiar with floating crane/derrick design develops and signs a written plan for the use of the mobile auxiliary crane. The plan is designed so that the applicable requirements of this section are met despite the position, travel, operation, and lack of physical attachment or corralling, use of rails or cable system, of the mobile auxiliary crane. The plan specifies the areas of the deck where the mobile auxiliary crane is permitted to be positioned, travel, and operate, and the parameters and limitations of such movements and operation. The deck is marked to identify the permitted areas for positioning, travel, and operation. The plan specifies the dynamic and environmental conditions that must be present for use of the plan. If the dynamic and environmental conditions in paragraph N 6 V of this section are exceeded, the mobile auxiliary crane is attached physically or corralled in accordance with Option 1, Option 2, or Option 4 of paragraph N 5 of this section. 1926.1437 N 7. The barge, pontoons, vessel, or other means of flotation used. 1926.1437 N 7 I through N 7 3 are structurally sufficient to withstand the static and dynamic loads of the crane/derrick when operating at the crane/derrick's maximum rated capacity with all anticipated deck loads and ballasted compartments. Have a subdivided hull with one or more longitudinal watertight bulkheads for reducing the free surface effect. Have access to void compartments to allow for inspection and pumping.